All right, well, welcome to CBN News and our campaign catch-up, and I'm joined by CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody and host of the DC Debrief podcast, John Stolnis. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dan.
Good to talk to you again, Dan.
Yeah, let's break it all down. I mean, a week goes by. I mean, it already feels like we're well removed. Trump's already in full campaign mode. I mean, last time we talked, we were sort of just coming off the trial, and it feels like it's way in the rearview mirror. I know there's a lot to come on that still, of course, but there's just so much happening that it fills the space. Now, David, I want to start with you here. Trump went to Nevada, of all places, which is, to the casual observer, you think, okay, Trump, he's gotten out of the courtroom that he had to be in every day, and he's ready to hit the trail, and he goes to Nevada. What's that all about? What's the strategy there? None of this stuff happens by accident. So why Nevada, and what's the deal with that?
Because he really believes that he can win Nevada. And indeed, he's on his way to doing that, Dan. Look, Nevada for a while has been all about Democrats, but recently in 2020, Biden only won it by 2.4%. It was pretty close. This time around, the polls are in Donald Trump's favor, and we can go through the polling, but the bottom line is this. Why is that exactly? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, inflation in the economy, and two, and it's related, the housing market. You put all of that together, and you've got a real problem for Biden because Nevada's been one of the states that's been hit really the hardest economically, and so Trump is able to capitalize on that. I mean, look, Donald Trump is winning among Hispanics in Nevada. He's winning among young people, 18 to 29 in Nevada. This is unheard of. It's unheard of. That Donald Trump winning in those two key demographics that Biden won by quite a bit in 2020. So everything has changed. Donald Trump has totally changed the playing field. And I know we're talking about Nevada, but we can talk about Minnesota. 10 electoral votes there. Nevada, 6 electoral votes. I mean, he could win in Nevada. He could win in Minnesota. He could win in New Jersey, possibly. That's a stretch, but he could. And then you just go, Virginia is in play. There's a lot of states that are actually in play, and clearly Nevada's one.
Yeah, we'll go to those polls just a second, David. John, I just want to get your take here on, because Trump was just in Nevada. And so, as David mentioned, the economy, one of these things he's leading in on there. One of the proposals Trump made in his speech was talking about, eliminating taxes on tips. Right. I mean, this is an interesting, I don't even think Republicans who are typically in favor of lowering taxes have always been have been able to push or even just trial balloon something like that. So what was your take on sort of where he's going with that?
Yeah, certainly he's trying to get some votes with a lot of the service workers. It's so much of what Nevada's economy is based on is tourism and the service economy. So he's trying to put some more money into those folks' pockets. But the union leader there of all of those service workers have poo-pooed the idea. They're calling it just a campaign stunt, and they note that it would have to be passed by Congress in order to go into effect. So they're basically saying he's just saying this without any weight behind it. But the point remains that there are votes to get there in Nevada. And one of the things the governor wrote an op-ed, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, talking about why Trump is leading there right now. It's a two-headed monster, and both of the monsters seem to be bad for Joe Biden and unworkable issues working together. So inflation with high prices and how hard it is to buy a home, the price of homes right now, and the high interest rates. The issue is that the Fed is raising interest rates to try and bring down inflation, but so you can't fix one problem without hurting the other problem right now. And that's where there's a real issue in Nevada for Joe Biden. If you keep raising interest rates, if the Fed raises interest rates, which is something outside the president's purview, you raise the interest rates to try and bring prices down. Maybe that helps prices. Maybe that helps inflation a little bit, but it makes it harder for people to buy homes. If you keep interest rates low, you get them to lower interest rates. Now the inflation could potentially go up. And so the question I think Americans should be asking themselves over these next 4 years is, what policies will each man put in place over the next 4 years to fight both of these different issues, which seem to be counterbalancing against one another? It's a very difficult job.
Yeah, for sure. And David, you touched on the polls there. I want to let's take a minute here and go through a couple of those. Which ones are standing out to you? And obviously, as John's talking about here, I mean, the economy's obviously one of the, if not the top issue this time around, just with so many people dealing with high prices on things. So what are the polls that are most interesting to you right now?
Well, I always like to do apples to apples polls. And if you look at, let's just go to Nevada for a second. Nevada, June of 2020, right? We're in June of 2024. So let's go back to June of 2020. Biden was up in the polls there by about 8 percentage points. Trump is now up by about 5 percentage points in Nevada. That's a 13-point swing. It's insane. I mean, a 13-point swing in a state that Democrats thought they were going to win, and maybe not handily, but definitely thought they were going to win. So that's something to consider. And then the Hispanic vote. I mean, you've just got to look at that. Donald Trump nationally lost the Hispanic vote by about 27 points to Joe Biden back in 2020. He's now up in polls, at least. Or excuse me, he's not up. He's down only 8 points. So he's cut that lead down to single digits. Look at the African American vote in polls. Donald Trump, and this is the floor, not the ceiling, but he's at about 18% of the African American vote. Come on, guys. I mean, think about this. I mean, Donald Trump was at 8%. He won 8% of the African American vote in 2016. He won 12% in 2020. You're going to tell me he's going to do 18% of the African American vote in 2024 and lose? That will not happen. If he does 18%, he's going to win. If he loses Hispanics by 8 points, he's going to win. So I just go down the list. I mean, every poll is bad for Biden. You're going to hear a lot of people. You're going to hear a lot of, Drudge Report is obviously big for Biden. You're going to see a lot of big headlines about, Trump's in trouble in the polls and yada, yada, yada. I don't see it. And once again, I want to be very, very clear. I'm a geek when it comes to the polls. I'm not looking at the top line. I'm deep diving. I'm looking at the crosstabs. If you deep dive in the poll and you look at who they're talking to, it is pretty clear that Donald Trump has every single advantage in the polls. And once again, to be clear, that doesn't mean that Trump's going to win. The polls can be wrong. But the difference, and I know I'm going long on this, but I think it's important. The difference here is that Donald Trump did not lead in any poll nationally. Nationally, I'm talking about in 2020 against Biden. He didn't lead in one poll. He's led in quite a few polls this time around. It's different, guys. The train has shifted.
Yeah, and you get the sense that Democrats maybe are feeling the same thing, John. I mean, I'm looking at this Wall Street Journal article that created some buzz called "Behind Closed Doors." Biden shows signs of slipping. Now, we both know that these articles don't just magically appear, right? I mean, you've got campaign operatives working these things. You've got people. So how something like this clearly got leaked. Somebody clearly wanted this narrative out into the public. So what's your reaction to this one?
I think the reason why it's credible on its surface to most Americans is because it sort of matches the eye test from what we see in public. We see a different Joe Biden than we saw even during the 2020 campaign, and certainly when he was vice president under Barack Obama. We see an older man. We see someone who struggles to get from place to place, it seems. But, one of the pushbacks that Democrats have been saying about the article is that there was not a single Democrat named in the article. The only named sources were 3 Republicans, Mike Johnson, former Speaker McCarthy, and Senator Risch, all of whom have plenty of reason to denigrate the president's health and mental faculties. And the rest were all unnamed sources. But some claim they were Democrats who were unnamed in the story. But a number of Democrats have since come out and said they were asked about it during the course of the story and were not quoted. And we're talking about how sharp President Biden has been in these private meetings and behind the scenes. So it's a matter of degree, I think. Certainly, the president, as an 82-year-old man, is different. He is probably slower. He is probably not as sharp as he used to be. That is true for most 82-year-olds, though, compared to 4 to 8 to 12 years ago. The question is whether he's too feeble, whether his mental faculties have gone too far affray, and that is where you're going to have to. That's where the American people are going to have to decide for themselves: is Joe Biden still up to the job?
Yeah. Dave, what's your reaction to that one? Because it's like John said, I mean, we don't know who actually was responsible for doing this. I mean, maybe the Wall Street Journal was just suddenly noticing that. But they obviously got these quotes, and I'm going to read just the beginning of it. So when President Biden met with congressional leaders in the West Wing in January to negotiate a Ukraine funding deal, he spoke so softly at times that some participants struggled to hear him, according to 5 people familiar with the meeting. He read from notes to make obvious points, paused for extended periods, sometimes closed his eyes for so long that some in the room wondered whether or not he had tuned out. And like John said, the eye test, I mean, this shouldn't be like this isn't a shocking report. I mean, he does these things kind of, sort of, just like what we read there, out in public sometimes. So what do you make of this thing?
Well, John's exactly right that it doesn't pass the eye test, let alone the smell test. And that's exactly right. But look, I've been around this town for a very long time. Let me tell you how this story basically works, this type of story. Okay, the same people that are going on the record defending Joe Biden are the same people that are criticizing him as unnamed sources. Okay, let's be clear about that. So in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is that the Democrats that are in this story, they want Biden out. They want another candidate. They want some sort of last-minute candidate. They know that Biden, out of all people, could lose to Trump. And that would be absolutely disastrous. So they planted this article. This is Democrats, not Republicans. I mean, come on. I mean, Republicans can have a field day with Biden any day, anytime they want. This is Democrats' concern and putting a trial balloon out there, using the Wall Street Journal as the outlet of choice. And then those same people typically, and when I say those same people, sometimes it's the same people, sometimes it's people in that office, in other words, the White House, who will say Biden is just fine. But they're the same people that also have connections to people who are saying, hey, why don't you go tell the Wall Street Journal this? I'm telling you, this is the way it works. It's a dirty town. It's dirty politics. And, you know, it's just the way it is. And that's what's really going on here.
Yeah, it's super interesting, of course. And again, this kind of stuff's only going to heat up in the coming weeks here. I want to get your guys' reaction to former President Trump did go on with Dr. Phil McGraw. And there's a comment that he made in this interview that is getting a lot of mileage in the mainstream media. Now, whether or not this is one of those hatchet jobs on a clip out of context, that's for you to decide. But it's essentially him saying that sometimes revenge can be justified, and he's talking about, you know, all these things that have happened to him, getting thrown into court and getting convicted, and, you know, what he calls, you know, a system stacked against him right now, and it was designed, you know, all the things that he's said about that, Alvin Bragg and all the rest. So what do you make of this, David? Let's start with you here on these comments. We know that he kind of tongue-in-cheek did the lock her up chant in 2016, but then backed off of that, right? He said, no, we were just kidding about that. And people were all freaking out about that. And now here they've actually done it, trying to do it to him. And so now they're saying, well, now he's really going to do it. And he's talking revenge and he's angry and he's out to get it. So what do you make of this in the interview with Dr. Phil?
I've known Trump for 15 years. I'm telling you right now what this is. This is The Art of the Deal by Trump. And The Art of the Deal, lesson 101 is to keep them all guessing. Keep him off balance. No one has any idea what he's going to do, but that's exactly what he wants. That's the MO for Trump. Now, you might say, well, that's stupid. That's the politically smart thing to do would be to say, of course, I'm not going to go for retribution. You know, this is just horrible. I'm going to take the high road. Guess what? That wouldn't be Donald Trump. That wouldn't be authentic. He is who he is. And that is the beauty of Trump. So, for example, if he had come out and said the generic political line that, no, we're not going to look for retribution, that would be wrong. Does anybody really believe that? Does anybody really believe that Trump might actually be not looking for retribution? I mean, come on. He has to be authentically who he is. And that's the beauty of Trump, is that in a way, a line like that you would think would normally hurt every single politician who would say it, but not Trump. Why? Because it plays to his brand, and his brand is authenticity. You know, people always talk about fact checking Donald Trump, and you can fact check him. You got to fact check Biden too. That's fine. You can fact check Trump all day long. But what they don't understand is that actually one of his strengths is authenticity, because he is who he is. No matter if he's talking to CNN or CBN, he's going to say the same thing. I remember that first interview I did with Donald Trump in 2011. I talked to him about him going to church. And I said, so do you go to church? He goes, hey, I love church. He goes, I go to church on the Sundays. I typically go on Easter and Christmas. Those are the two times I go. Now, who would say that? I mean, that's not necessarily the CBN answer, if you will, to say that you go only twice a year. But that's what he did. Why? Because that is the truth. And he wasn't going to be someone that he's not. And that's extremely refreshing to voters at some sort of emotional and relatable level.
Now, John, I would imagine that there are a lot of Trump supporters who, maybe part of the reason he gave this answer as well is that he knows a lot of people are fed up and, view this as kind of, on his side, like a sham trial and all that stuff. And so they're probably clamoring. I mean, these are the same people who were out there chanting "lock her up." So,
right.
So I don't know. What's your reaction to the whole revenge thing? Do you think this is rhetoric or what's your response?
I think he means it. I think, whether he's just saying it because it's how he honestly feels right now. But I think if he has the opportunity, he will. He'll tit for tat for sure. I mean, and that's how I think that's how he's always operated as a businessman, as a politician. If, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think he would see it as weakness if he didn't go after his enemies and the people who he feels have wronged him. And you're right. His base will lap this up. His base wants him to go after his enemies. His base wants him to go after some of these Democrats and these so-called liberals and whoever else that it is that is the target at the moment. This feeds right into exactly what they wanted. He knows that. He knows Donald Trump, maybe more than any other president we've ever seen, or former president or presidential candidate, knows his base because he's cultivated this base. This base has changed dramatically in the last since 2016 when he ran for president. It's a completely different party. It's a party made in his image, and so he knows exactly what they want to hear. He knows exactly what's going to motivate them and keep them engaged and get them out to the polls for him in November.
Yeah. All right. Hey, guys, time for one more here. The VP, the Veep stakes, the term. I hate that term, but I'm just going to say it anyway.
Yeah.
But where are we at on this? John, go ahead. Let's start with you here. Where are we at on the VP race here for Trump, who, obviously we've heard multiple names out there, but what's the latest?
I think Senator Tim Scott just checks a whole lot of boxes for him. It's a minority candidate. He's making this push for African Americans, and Tim Scott could certainly help with a lot of the moderate to right-leaning Republicans who may still be a little wary of Trump, or who are at least considering voting for Donald Trump, who maybe didn't do so 4 years ago. I think Marco Rubio, without the 12th Amendment, would also be another really strong choice, but that's kind of an unnecessary hurdle to try and have to figure out whether he's going to resign from his Senate seat so that he can change his residency to then be the VP pick. There are other choices besides Marco Rubio where you don't have to do all those machinations. So I just don't think that's a realistic thing. The Hill had an interesting article, I think it was at the end of last week, with some dark horse candidates. And I think the dark horse candidate that I don't think it's going to happen, but I think we've seen some softening in the relationship over the last couple of weeks is Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley still is getting 15 to 20% of the vote in a lot of these states that are still going through primaries. And I think a lot of people see them as protest votes against Donald Trump, or a way to make their voices heard that he is not their preferred candidate. Nikki Haley said she would vote for him. And even Donald Trump has softened some of his rhetoric with Haley, essentially admitting it was a nasty campaign, but that she's a smart woman. So it seems like there might be some thawing there, and maybe some of the people on Capitol Hill who have been saying you need someone to soften your edges, you need someone who can reach out to some of these other Republican voters that will not vote for you but would vote for her. Maybe she could end up still being the vice presidential candidate. I think she's a dark horse that probably makes the most sense if those two could let their egos put them to the side long enough in order to make a partnership like that work.
Yeah, super interesting. And I mean, it's similar logic to Mike Pence, right? Like when his selection happened in the first Trump term. David, your response, what are you looking at here for VP?
I'd be absolutely shocked if he picked Nikki Haley. It's not going to happen. There's no way. And here's why. According to, and I'm not going to put words in Trump's mouth, but the MAGA base feels this way, that she's a globalist. She's a neocon. Once again, I'm quoting MAGA, if you will. She has a totally different foreign policy outlook than Donald Trump. So for that reason alone, it doesn't make sense. They would be at they would disagree on that. So it doesn't make any sense just from a practical standpoint. So that's that. There's no way. Absolutely not. I personally think you should pick a female. I don't think it's going to happen. It would have been Kristi Noem, but oh well, we know how that ended. And I'd love him to pick Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I think she'd be great, but I think she's too green right now as it relates to. I don't know if he's going to go. That might be a bridge too far, but I think she'd be a great VP. Actually, he wants someone who's loyal. I think the person to keep your eye on is Dr. Ben Carson. I think that could be someone that could actually be a possibility, because Trump wants someone that's going to be no drama, that is going to be someone that has his back, someone that's not looking to run for president while he's president. And that's Dr. Ben Carson. There's no doubt about it. Now, he is the chamomile tea of politics. It is true. I mean, he's a guy that, if you don't have, well, I want to be nice to him because, he's a friend of mine. But the truth of the matter is, he is somewhat a bit of a melatonin pill at times. There's no doubt about it. Bless his heart, as they say in the South. But I think Dr. Ben Carson could be the pick. I really do. Having said that, Tim Scott does, as John said, check a lot of boxes. That might be the conventional pick, the way he goes. I think he'd be good. Tim Scott obviously has a great backstory. Keep your eye on J.D. Vance as well. If he picks Elise Stefanik, I think that'll be a nightmare. I think that might be kind of the trendy, kind of sexy pick, if you will, as it relates to New York. And, can he reach moderates and all? I think that's a bridge too far as well. So I think it's either going to be Tim Scott, Dr. Ben Carson, or J.D. Vance. I think one of those three.
All right, gentlemen, appreciate your insight as always. Before we go, is there anything we're missing here? We're in almost mid-June now, and I mean, you know how these things go. It feels kind of like, well, it's not till November. I mean, it's going to be here before we know it, and all of a sudden it's going to ramp up. So what else do we need to get off the slate, or we got it all pretty much covered here?
John?
I just, so much can change between now and November. That's why these weekly check-ins are good, because all it takes is one quote hanging out there in the ether, one misstep on the campaign trail, and all of a sudden everything we've said these last couple of weeks doesn't mean a thing.
Well,
one macaca or something like that,
Yeah, I think the key is obviously June 27th. That'll be the first debate. That's coming up here in just a couple of weeks. That's going to be huge. Donald Trump wants a drug test for Joe Biden. Don't think that's going to happen, but he's asking for it. So we'll wait to see what happens with that. And let me be very clear here. There are going to be a lot of Democrats rooting against, not for, but against Joe Biden. Democrats rooting against Joe Biden. There's a view that this is a trial balloon debate. I mean, there's a reason this is happening earlier rather than later. Remember, Joe Biden said that he wanted a couple of debates. Well, why aren't they in September and October? Oh, in June? Isn't that interesting? A lot of people conventionally say, well, that's because he needs to turn things around, the poll numbers. Well, hold on. I thought the polls were close. So, look, this is partly about polling. They've got to change the narrative. They understand they got to do something. But I also think there's a lot more to it than that. I think this is a trial balloon debate. I believe there are a lot of Democrats who want to see if Joe can hold up to Trump. And if Trump mops the floor with Biden, get ready for some of these our YouTube discussions to be about, okay, now what for the Democrats? Yeah. And I think that is where this goes, especially in the morning of June 28th. Then again, Trump wants a drug test, and Biden performed well at the State of the Union for a little while until, let's be honest, guys. I don't want to speak out of school, but all of a sudden Biden is there. Guys, please. So there's going to be questions, legitimate questions that journalists that want to do their job about whether or not, what's the medical history of Joe Biden as he gets ready for big events like the one coming up in June. No one will ask it. No one will dare ask it, guys. It's taboo. I know. Yeah. Maybe you guys are even squeamish of me talking about it. But the truth is that's what people are thinking, and it's important to channel we the people.
Yeah. And I think this debate, that is super, super interesting. We'll dive more into that next time on the campaign catch up, because there's a lot. As much as this has happened the last couple of times, guys. When at the State of the Union, the talk of Biden's, fumbling, and he did have, his usual kind of tics and things, but he didn't freeze for 30 seconds or a minute up there on the stage. And so I think then, well, is he able to swing things back in his favor? Going, yeah, like he's getting a little older, but he's able to get through this stuff. Or is he going to have a major flub, like a freeze or something like that on stage that's just really devastating and obvious, super obvious to everyone? Because there's still people like Joe Scarborough, guys, that are sitting there saying he's sharp as a tack and all of this. So, I think it would take something major like that on a debate. I mean, that's going to have huge I would imagine that's going to have huge ratings, probably more
monster
than a
ratings
debate.
Yeah.
So we'll get into all that. We'll talk more debate next time, guys. David Brody, John Stolnis, appreciate you guys being here and breaking all this down as we do each and every week.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys.